Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. And may I just start by, on behalf of Turaco, thanking the Ministry of Mines and Petroleum and Energy and the Department of Geology and Mines for supporting Turaco and our FEMA project in southern Côte d'Ivoire. In the last 18 months, we asked for their support in taking ownership of this project, and we promised that we would move this project forward very quickly and it would be our focus. And quite amazingly, in the space of less than 18 months, we've established a FEMA as a JORC resource of just over 3.5 million ounces, and that's actually out of date. You'll see that updated shortly, so it's continuing to grow. And we've also done a huge amount of metallurgical work, and you'll see this project actually developed into a mine over the next couple of years. And this would not happen without the support of the Ministry of Mines and the Department of Geology and Mines, so we thank you for that. Just quickly on Turaco, who we are, we're listed on the ASX. Quite amazingly, over the last 18 months, we've gone from a $20 million market capitalisation to over a $500 million market capitalisation company, and that's obviously driven by the success at FEMA. We've also gone from a reasonably low cash position to a very strong financial position. We just completed a $60 million raising from some of the world's leading institutional investors in the gold industry. And today we have well over $80 million of funding. And that's important. We're all shareholders at the management level. In fact, collectively, still probably the largest shareholder of the company. And so we won't be raising money again until we develop this into a mine. Just looking at it over the last 18 months, as I said, it's been pretty phenomenal. We acquired the FEMA project, which we now have 80% ownership of, in March 2024. Within the first 6 months, we established a maiden JORC resource of 2.5 million ounces of gold, which we announced in August last year. And then in the following 8 months, we added over 1 million ounces to that at a discovery cost of less than $10 an ounce to take our resource today as 3.55 million ounces. And as I said, you'll see another update to that resource before the year's out. So that resource is already out of date. We've also commenced pre-feasibility study work, which we'll have completed in the first quarter of next year, and also done a huge amount of metallurgical test work, which has been critical for this project and to move it forward. Our share price has obviously performed well in a very strong gold market, but that's been driven by regular drill results, not across one discovery, but across multiple discoveries. And that's the key with this project, is this is a gold camp that will continue to find more and more deposits, as we're doing, with results even that we just put out yesterday on another deposit. You've just heard about Côte d'Ivoire. I mean, I don't think there's anyone at this conference that could argue for gold that there's not a better country in West Africa to be operating in Côte d'Ivoire. It's unquestionably the premier jurisdiction in West Africa, and I would argue in Australia. I mean, for me, there's not a place in the world that I prefer to be operating as the CEO of a gold company looking to develop a gold project. And the proof's in the pudding. As you just heard, gold production has quadrupled over the last 10 years. It's driving the growth in West African gold production. It's Côte d'Ivoire. And also that's going to continue. You just saw the number of exploration permits has gone from 20 to over 200 over the last 10 years. And this could not happen without a very supportive and stable government. And the opportunity is immense, and I think Turaco is proof of that. In the space of 18 months, we've gone from a very small company to a company of over $500 million market capitalisation, and now have a resource of over 3.5 million ounces, which puts the FEMA project on the map as one of the most significant undeveloped projects in West Africa. So it's pretty phenomenal for a company like Turaco to have that opportunity. So just looking at our project, I also say we're not only in the best country in the world or in Africa to be developing a new gold mine, we're also in the best part of that country. We're in the south, on the border with Ghana there that you can see in red. We're only a 2-hour drive out of Abidjan, the capital, the most developed city in West Africa. We sit on a brand new sealed road. In fact, the deposits that I'll run you through, the furthest, we've got 4 deposits in our resource so far. The furthest deposit is only 10 kilometres off that road. The main deposit is only about 2 kilometres off that road. We also have access to grid power, and that's fed through hydropower. One of the main Côte d'Ivoire hydro schemes sits on our doorstep, the Ayami hydro scheme. And so we'll be able to access grid power from about 25 kilometres to where we plan to build a processing plant. So it really ticks all the boxes, and importantly, an incredibly safe place to be working. We have no security requirements whatsoever on this site. So you could not find a better located project in West Africa or Africa to develop a gold mine. But of course, what we're there for originally was the geology. And this is what is the most amazing thing about the Afema project that blew us away when we looked at this project, and why many companies have been keen to be involved in this project over the last 10 to 15 years. The project covers the extension of one of the main belts in Ghana that you see there in green and brown, which is referred to as the Sefwi Belt. In Ghana, there's the Sefwi Belt and then the Ashanti Belt out to the east. And this hosts some seriously large deposits such as Chirano, Bibiani, Ahafo, and that extends across the border into the southeast part of Côte d'Ivoire. Our project area, which is a very large contiguous package of ground, in fact, we now have our foot on 1,600 square kilometres, of which 1,000 square kilometres is granted position, and then some applications surrounding that, really covers a majority of this very prospective belt as it sits in Côte d'Ivoire. We have a number of different exploration angles. To date, the focus has been along the eastern margin of that Sefwi belt, which we refer to as, in Ghana, the Bibiani-Chirano Shear, or the Afema Shear, referred to it in Côte d'Ivoire. We've got 35 kilometres of strike on that. 25 kilometres of that sits in a granted mining permit, which sits in the middle of our project area. This is where our resource is situated, and this is a massive gold system. We also have the Sefwi Greenstone Belt to the west, where we have serious anomalies that we've just started drilling outside the mining permit on the exploration permit and having immediate discovery success. And then we have another structure sitting in grey there, the Yasangara Shear, sitting in the Kumasi sedimentary basin there, running through our project area as well, which has very strong soil geochemistry. Once again, started drilling on that and having immediate success. So this project, without question, will continue to grow. At the moment, we have our resource of 4 deposits. This is underpinned by the very large Woulo Woulo discovery, which is a fairly recent discovery that we've drilled out now to 1.6 million ounces of gold. It's about 1 gram per tonne, so moderate grade, but as I'll show you, a very simple deposit in all respects, from a resource modelling, metallurgically very simple, and will be very simple to mine with low strip ratio. And that will underpin our future mining operation here at Afema. And that's supplemented by these higher grade deposits along the Afema Shear, Jonction, Anuri and Asupiri, which I'll run you through, which sit at like 1.5 to 2 grams per tonne. And all of this mineralisation is from surface. It is all open pittable. And 60% of that 3.6 million ounces has already been drilled to indicated category. In fact, that's the 60%, approximately 2 million ounces, that will optimise into reserve pit shells at a very conservative gold price of less than $2,000 an ounce. So hence we're able to move this project forward very quickly and don't have to do a huge amount of infill drilling. In fact, the infill drilling that we're doing will be completed over the next month or so on that resource. So just zooming in on the mining permit, as I said, all our resources currently sit within an existing granted mining permit, which is quite unique for a project at this stage. And you can see the eastern margin of the Sefwi belt there. There's multiple shears, which we call the Afema Shear. It's not one shear, it's multiple shears across a width of about 2 to 3 kilometres, and you see 25 kilometres of strike of that sitting within our mining permit there. And you can see Jonction deposit in the north, that's our highest grade deposit. Then there's no drilling for 5 kilometres along that key controlling contact there before you come into the Anuri deposit at another 500,000 ounces of deposit, and sitting right next to the Anuri deposit on a parallel shear, only 1 kilometre away from the Anuri deposit, is the Asupiri deposit, which we've now drilled out to 800,000 ounces, albeit we've done a lot more drilling subsequent to that. And then our 4th deposit, Woulo Woulo, sits on a north-south splay coming off that Afema Shear, still within the granted mining permit. And as I said, we've drilled 3 kilometres of strike there for 1.6 million ounces of gold. From Woulo Woulo to Jonction, the furthest 2 deposits apart is less than 10 kilometres. So everything that we're drilling here will be processed through a central processing plant near Woulo Woulo and sits within a 10-kilometre radius. Just touching on each of these deposits quickly, the Woulo Woulo deposit, as I said, this will underpin a future development with 1.6 million ounces at 1 gram per tonne. As I said, we've drilled it over 3 kilometres of strike. The mineralisation's from surface. That's how it was discovered, through soil anomaly and trenching. We've only drilled it down to about 200 metres across the northern 1.5 kilometres of that 3 kilometre strike. The southern 1.5 kilometres has still only been drilled down to not much more than 100 metres vertical depth, so plenty of room to grow open pittable ounces on the southern part of that strike there. Very simple deposit metallurgically. We've done actually detailed variability and optimisation test work on this now. We get plus 90% recoveries through conventional processing at a very coarse grind of 75 micron, very low cyanide consumption of less than a half a kilo per tonne of ore to achieve that 90% recoveries in the oxide transitional and fresh zone. So a very straightforward deposit. And as you can see here, unlike most deposits, it's not made up of several narrow veins. This is just one wide bulk zone of mineralisation that over that 3 kilometres pinches and swells a little bit from 20 metres up to about 100 metres in true width and averages about 30 to 40 metres in true width. So there's no issues around modelling this as a resource, the continuity of grade from section to section, and also down hole, those intercepts there, I could reel off 100 of them, very typical, and they're not carried by 1 or 2 metres of high grade. They're very consistent on the 1 metre samples there. So a very simple deposit to also model as a resource. Looking at the growth of Woolloo Woolloo, we've got parallel structures that we're just starting to turn our attention to now. So just immediately to the west, we have the Herman trend, where we've recently put out results such as 6 metres at 6 grams, 15 metres at 2 grams, etc., etc. We've got 1 kilometre strike of this that we're now drilling, and that'll add some more ounces, probably a higher grade, to this Woolloo Woolloo deposit. And then we've also got parallel structures to the east. I mean, just a few weeks ago, we put out a result of 4 metres at 80 grams per tonne, just from reconnaissance drilling on a parallel structure there. So there's no doubt this Woolloo Woolloo will grow both at depth, but also with parallel structures. And then looking at these higher grade deposits along the Ephema Shear, the Junction deposit, 10 kilometres away from Woolloo Woolloo, about 600,000 ounces at 2 grams per tonne. This is just a high grade shoot, has a small strike length of about 200 metres at surface. But as I said before, there's about 5 kilometres of the key controlling contact here that has not even seen any drilling, but has very strong anomalism. So we're very confident that we'll find more of these junction shoots, which we're drilling for at the moment, and find more of these 500,000 million ounce deposits along that 5 kilometre contact. And that will be a key focus for the next 6 months. And then we come into the Anuri deposit, which sits along the same, essentially controlling contact as Junction. As I said, about 500,000 ounces here at 1.7 grams per tonne. This has really only been drilled down to about 2 kilometres. In fact, we've got mineralisation across 3 kilometres, not soil anomalism, but drilling mineralisation in drilling across 3 kilometres, and we've only really drilled 1 kilometre of that down to about 200 metres, and that gives us 500,000 ounces. So we're progressively stepping out beneath that shallow historical drilling in the oxide and extending the resource along strike at depth into the fresh mineralisation. Like Junction and Anuri, we've done detailed metallurgical test work. This does require a finer grind, so our processing flow sheet here will be a flotation. Then we do a fine grind on a very low mass recovery concentrate of only 3 to 4% of the volume that we do a regrind on. And then we just leach it with cyanide, and we're getting really 90% plus recoveries from all of these deposits, and that's been critical to this project. Asupiri is the same, so this sits on a parallel shear to the Junction Anuri structure. Here we've got 5 kilometres of shallow drilling in the top 30 metres in the oxide that was done by some previous explorers, and we're just progressively extending that at depth. We've only drilled about 2 kilometres of that 5 kilometres at depth down to not much more than 100 metres here, and that's 800,000 ounces. We've actually done a huge amount of drilling on this since this resource, and you'll see an update on that in the next couple of months. In terms of growing the Ephema Shear mineralisation, we've only drilled 3 deposits. Historically, there was 10 mined as shallow heap leach operation back in the 1990s. So we've still got lots more pits just to where we know we have mineralisation to drill out. One of those, the next cab off the rank, is Begnapan, where we put some results out yesterday. We've now drilled mineralisation across about 2 kilometres of strike, down to about 150 metres. And importantly, we've also done metallurgical test work on this, which we put out yesterday, confirming we can achieve 90% recoveries through the same processing flow sheet as Junction and Anuri. So it's immediately another deposit which will add significant ounces to our 3.6 million ounces. Then we have Talesio in the north there, which sits along strike from Junction, which we believe is another high-grade plunging shoot like Junction, which we've barely touched the surface on. And then regionally, this is the soil geochemistry across our permit-wide area. All of our 3.6 million ounces basically sits in the south there of that sort of red zone, which is anomalous gold in soils. The anomalous gold in soils to the north there have never seen a drill hole. And after the current wet season in November, you'll see a big focus for us looking at making new discoveries to the north there, off the mining permit on that northern exploration permit where we have compelling anomalies over several kilometres of plus 100 ppb soils that we've infilled, trenched, and now await to drill once conditions allow us to get in there. And then you can see the other structure to the south there, which lights up with soil geochemistry, the Nima Lesser trend there, which is some artisanal mining. In fact, it's the only artisanal mining that we have on our side of any significance is along that trend there. We recently did some drilling on that, as I'll show you, got some good results. Then out in the Sefwi belt, we've got intrusions with mineralisation over the top of them. Baffia is an example. We've only just started drilling these. First results, we got 32 metres at 1.7 grams, 21 metres at 1.8. This is a new discovery, which once again is not in our current resource, and we'll be drilling out over the next 6 to 12 months. And as I touched on before, Nima Lesser down to the south there, we've done reconnaissance wide space drilling in the oxide. We've got 80 metres of oxide here. Over 10 kilometres now drilled with wide space drilling, typically 10 to 20 metres at 2 or 3 grams per tonne that we'll look to drill out and bring into our resource. So looking at us in the West African sort of landscape, Athema is now one of only 4 plus 3 million ounce undeveloped gold projects held by a non-producing company such as Turaco, the others being Predictive and Robex, which you've heard of earlier today, and then Montage. Montage and Predictive are actually under construction, and Predictive have just completed a DFS. So it really does put us in quite a special group of projects at 3.5 million ounces. But importantly, this resource will definitely continue to grow, and that's a big focus for us. So just in summary, thank you for coming and listening. We're well funded. We won't be raising money again until we develop this, and this will be a mine, and we expect this to be one of the most significant operating mines in due course in Côte d'Ivoire. We have a team that has a lot of experience in West Africa, in Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Mali. We've been operating there for a long time and have had significant success there. So we've done it before, and we'll do it again with Turaco, and thanks for coming along.